I never thought that a single photo could flip my life upside down, but that's exactly what happened last Saturday. There I was, standing next to my boss, Mr. Olivier, the company's director. We were both smiling as he shook my hand. The caption I posted read, "Finally got that promotion. Hard work pays off. Career milestone unlocked." It felt like just another career update to share with my network. I had no idea how wrong I was. My name is Rebecca, and at 25, I had finally landed my big break at Preston Co. After years of grinding, I moved from being an entry-level assistant to a department head. It wasn't easy. 4 years of overtime, countless presentations, and more coffee than I care to admit. But I did it on my own. That meant everything to me. The excitement from my promotion was still fresh when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a saved number, but I recognized it right away. My mother. After 8 years of silence, she was calling me out of the blue. My hand shook as I stared at the screen. Memories of our last conversation came flooding back, memories I had buried deep. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Hello?" "Rebecca, sweetheart." Her voice sounded exactly as I remembered. Sweet but fake. It was the tone she used when she wanted something. "We just saw your post. Your father and I are so proud of you." That word hit me like a slap. Proud? Where was their pride when I needed it most? "Thanks," I muttered, gripping the edge of my desk to steady myself. "We should celebrate. Why don't you come over this weekend? We could throw a proper party. The whole family would love to see how successful you've become." The whole family. That meant my younger sister Madison, the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. "I'll think about it," I replied, my throat tightening. "Please do, darling. We've missed you so much. It's time to put the past behind us, don't you think?" After we hung up, I sat there, heart pounding, staring blankly at my desk. 8 years of silence, broken because of a single social media post. 8 years since I walked out of that house, vowing never to go back. And now, they wanted to reconnect. My fingers absent-mindedly brushed against the medical alert bracelet on my wrist. It read, "Severe peanut allergy." A constant reminder of the allergy my parents treated like an inconvenience and the cruel jokes Madison pulled on me. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. It was a picture of me and Grandma at my college graduation. Her smile was full of genuine pride, not the hollow kind I'd just heard from my mother. Grandma was the one who had been there for me through everything. She believed in me when no one else did. Her words echoed in my mind. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who treat you like family. That unexpected phone call had brought back every painful memory I had tried to bury. But part of me wondered if I was ready to confront it all. After that call, I couldn't focus on work. My mind kept drifting back to the past, the life I'd left behind. Growing up, I was always the other daughter. Madison, 4 years younger than me, was the star of the family. Everything revolved around her, and I was always left to fend for myself. My parents weren't cruel in obvious ways. They weren't yelling or hitting, nothing you'd see in a dramatic movie. It was more subtle, dismissive comments, the way they overlooked me, and how Madison's every achievement was celebrated like she'd cured cancer. Meanwhile, my accomplishments were met with a shrug, or, worse, a condescending, "That's nice, Rebecca." I remember my 11th birthday so vividly. I'd been dropping hints for months about an art kit I wanted, colored pencils, watercolors, and a sketchbook. It wasn't even expensive. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd listen this time. Instead, I got a pack of boring number 2 pencils. "You need these for school anyway," Mom had said, brushing off my disappointment. That same year, Madison's 8th birthday was a backyard extravaganza. They hired a princess performer, decked out the yard with decorations straight out of a fairy tale, and invited half the neighborhood. I sat on the sidelines, watching her bask in the attention while I clutched my stupid pack of pencils. "Madison's just more artistic," Mom would say when relatives questioned the favoritism. "She needs the right tools to develop her talent." It wasn't just about gifts, though. It was the way they talked about us. She has real potential, they'd say about Madison. Rebecca's more practical. That word, practical, felt like a life sentence. It was their way of saying I was ordinary, forgettable, someone who'd never be special, no matter how hard I tried. The worst part? Madison knew she was the favorite, and she loved it. If something went wrong, she'd blame me, and my parents believed her without question. She'd spill juice on my homework and laugh when I got upset. "Oops, sorry," she'd chirp, batting her lashes like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. By the time I was a teenager, I'd stopped bothering to tell my parents how I felt. It never changed anything. My dad would sigh and say, "Madison needs us more. She's got talent to nurture." Talent to nurture. That was their excuse for everything. Even when I got accepted into an advanced math program at school, they skipped the award ceremony to attend Madison's school play. I sat alone in the classroom, watching other parents beam with pride as their kids received certificates. When I got home, I placed my award on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would notice. Mom glanced at it and said, "That's nice, dear, but have you seen Madison's painting? It's being displayed in the school hallway." That's when I realized I could win a Nobel Prize, and they'd still only care about Madison. But the real breaking point? That came when I was 13. I'll never forget it. Grandma had invited me over for lunch. She made me my favorite sandwich, peanut butter and honey. I remember watching her spread it onto the bread, my mouth watering. I took one bite and knew something was wrong. My throat tightened. Breathing became harder. I dropped the sandwich and clutched at my neck, panic flooding my body. "Rebecca! Rebecca!" Grandma's voice was frantic as she called 911. I don't remember much after that, just the sound of sirens and Grandma's hand squeezing mine in the ambulance. Her voice was calm, even though I could hear the fear behind it. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Just keep breathing." The doctor said I'd developed a severe peanut allergy, something that can happen out of the blue. I'd never had any issues before, but now peanuts could kill me. When my parents arrived at the hospital, they weren't worried, they were annoyed. "This is just perfect," Mom muttered, tapping her foot impatiently. "As if we don't have enough to deal with." Dad glanced at his watch. "First the math tutoring, now this. Everything with you is so complicated, Rebecca." I pressed myself against the hospital bed, trying to make myself invisible. Their words hurt more than the allergic reaction ever could. After that, my life changed. Grandma bought me a medical alert bracelet and made sure I carried an EpiPen everywhere. She even called the school to explain my condition. My parents? They barely acknowledged it. Madison, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious. "Watch out! Rebecca might die if she eats the wrong thing," she'd shout at family gatherings, waving peanut butter sandwiches in my face. Everyone would laugh awkwardly, like it was a harmless joke. It wasn't. Madison wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what she was doing. And my parents never corrected her. If anything, they acted irritated by the extra precautions I needed. I learned to be hyper-vigilant. I packed my own food, triple-checked every label, and never trusted anything I hadn't personally inspected. It was exhausting, but it became my normal. When I graduated high school, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be my moment of triumph. I earned a full academic scholarship to Northwestern State University. I worked my ass off for it, balancing part-time jobs and maintaining straight A's while managing my allergy. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I couldn't wait to share the news. "I got into Northwestern," I announced at dinner, trying to keep my voice steady. "Full scholarship." "That's nice, dear," Mom said without even looking up from her plate. I swallowed my frustration and continued. "The thing is, I'll need help with housing. The scholarship covers tuition, but not accommodation." Dad shook his head. "No." I blinked. "What?" "We're saving for Madison's education," he said, his tone final. "She's planning to go to Riverside in a few years, and that's not cheap." Madison smirked from across the table, twirling her pasta like she'd just won a prize. "Guess you'll have to figure it out on your own," she said sweetly. I fought back tears. "It's just the housing cost. I can cover everything else." Mom cut me off, her voice sharp. "Rebecca, we've made our decision. If you want to go to college out of state, You'll have to figure out housing on your own." That's when Grandma walked in, holding a congratulations balloon and a gift bag. "What's going on?" she asked, looking around at the tense faces. Madison giggled. "Oh, Rebecca got into college, but Mom and Dad won't pay for housing. They're saving for my education." Grandma's smile faded. Her expression darkened. "Is that true?" she asked quietly. When my parents didn't answer, she turned to Madison. "And you," Grandma said, her voice cold. "You're becoming a spoiled, cruel child. I'm ashamed of how you're behaving." Madison's smug expression crumpled. She burst into fake tears, and my parents rushed to comfort her. Grandma turned back to me. "Pack your things. You're coming home with me." 30 minutes after Grandma told me to pack my things, I was out the door with her by my side. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. My parents' angry voices and Madison's fake sobs echoed through the house as we left. But I was done. I'd spent my whole life being overlooked, dismissed, and made to feel like I wasn't enough. Grandma was my lifeline. "You focus on your studies," she said firmly as we loaded my bags into her car. "I'll cover your housing. Don't you worry about a thing." And that's exactly what I did. College was everything I'd dreamed of, and more. For the first time in my life, I felt free. My tiny apartment near campus became my space, my sanctuary. I decorated it with secondhand furniture and random thrift store finds, but it was mine. I didn't have to walk on eggshells anymore, worried about what Madison would do or say next. Grandma visited often, never missing a birthday, a holiday, or any special moment. She'd bring homemade cookies and sit on my couch, listening intently as I told her about my classes, my part-time job, and the friends I was making. My parents and Madison? Ghosts. They didn't call on Christmas. No birthday cards, no texts, no congrats when I graduated. Nothing. 8 years of complete silence. And honestly, I was fine with it. I'd built a new life. A better one. That's why the call from my mother hit me so hard. I'd convinced myself I was over it, that I didn't care. But hearing her voice stirred up emotions I thought I'd buried. I kept replaying her words in my head. "We're so proud of you." Proud. What a joke. They hadn't been proud when I got into Northwestern. They hadn't been proud when I worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. They hadn't been proud when I graduated with honors. But now that I'd posted about my promotion, suddenly, they cared. Grandma was the only one who'd ever been truly proud of me. She never missed a chance to remind me how far I'd come. "This is what I've always wanted," she told me during one of our weekly dinners. "For you to be happy and thriving. That's all that matters." Her words comforted me, but the past still lingered in the back of my mind. And no matter how much I tried to focus on my new job, that call from my mother wouldn't stop echoing. The following week, I made a decision that surprised even me. I found myself standing outside my parents' house. The sight of it brought back a flood of memories. The cream-colored walls, the perfectly trimmed lawn, the brass door knocker I used to stretch to reach as a kid. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to just walk away. But before I could make up my mind, the door swung open. "Rebecca!" Mom's voice was overly cheerful, like she'd rehearsed it. "Sweetheart, it's so good to see you." She pulled me into a hug, stiff and unfamiliar. The living room hadn't changed at all. Same beige furniture, same framed photos on the mantel. Except now, Madison's achievements were front and center. Her Riverside degree hung proudly above the fireplace, along with pictures from her art exhibits and awards she'd won over the years. I scanned the room. Not a single picture of me. "Look who's here!" Mom called out. Dad appeared from the kitchen, nodding in my direction. "Rebecca, good to see you." Madison was lounging in Dad's old armchair, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up briefly, smirked, and went back to whatever she was doing. "We're so proud of you," Mom said again, her words ringing hollow. "A department head at your age. That's quite an achievement." "Thanks," I muttered, feeling out of place. "We need to celebrate properly," Mom continued. "A big family gathering right here at the house. Everyone would love to see you. Aunt Marjorie, all your cousins." "And Grandma?" I asked pointedly. Of course, Mom said quickly, though I noticed the way her smile tightened. We want to make things right, Rebecca. It's been too long. Every instinct in me screamed that this was a bad idea, but before I knew it, I was nodding. Sure, that sounds nice. The next 3 weeks were weird. Mom texted me constantly with updates about the party. Your favorite dessert will be there. Madison is so excited to see you. Even Madison, who hadn't spoken to me in years, sent a friend request on social media. Her message read, "Time to put the past behind us, sis." It was all so fake. I could see right through it. But Grandma was thrilled. This is what I've always wanted, she said over dinner, for our family to be whole again. Her optimism gave me a glimmer of hope. Maybe things really could be different. The day of the party arrived, and I pulled up to my parents' house, feeling like a guest at my own funeral. Cars were already lined up along the street, and inside, the house buzzed with activity. Aunt Marjorie's daughter, Lori, was running around with her phone, recording everything like a little documentary filmmaker. The smell of catered food filled the air, and to my surprise, everything was nut-free. That was a first. Rebecca! Grandma's warm hug greeted me as I stepped inside. You look beautiful, sweetheart. Aunt Marjorie hugged me next. We're so proud of you, kiddo. Department head at your age? Incredible. Madison stood by the stairs in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She greeted guests with a perfectly practiced smile, like she was at a beauty pageant. Meanwhile, my parents floated around the house, acting like perfect hosts, as if the last 8 years hadn't happened. When everyone finally sat at the large dining table, Mom stood and clinked her glass for attention. We're so happy to have everyone here today, she began with a big smile. As you know, we're celebrating Rebecca's promotion. Polite claps followed, but I could feel the tension in the room. Something was off. It's wonderful to see her finally finding her footing in the corporate world, Mom continued. The word finally made my stomach turn. And speaking of success, Mom added, her voice brightening, I'd like to take a moment to talk about our Madison. My heart sank. She launched into a long speech about Madison's achievements, graduating from Riverside with honors, her artistic talent, her bright future. It went on, and all I could do was sit there, frozen. Finally, Mom reached the real reason for the party. And now that Rebecca has this wonderful position, we're hoping she can help her incredibly qualified sister join her prestigious company. The table went silent. I felt Grandma's eyes on me, saw Aunt Marjorie shift uncomfortably in her chair. Lori's phone stayed focused on me, recording every painful second. I cleared my throat. Actually, I'm not in a position to hire anyone. I'm a department head, not a director. I don't make hiring decisions. Mom's smile tightened. Surely with your new influence? Excuse me, I said, standing up. Mom, Dad, can we talk privately? They followed me into the kitchen, their fake smiles vanishing the second we were alone. What the hell is this? I asked quietly. I thought this was supposed to be a celebration of my promotion, not a networking event for Madison. Don't be selfish, Rebecca, Mom snapped. Madison needs this opportunity. Family helps family. Selfish? I repeated, my voice low but steady. After 8 years of silence, you only reached out because you want something from me, and I'm the selfish one. Dad's expression hardened. We've given Madison every advantage we could. We've invested everything in her future. The least you can do is help your sister now that you're in a position to do so. My mind was spinning. It wasn't just disappointment or anger. It was the realization that nothing had changed. They hadn't reached out because they missed me, or because they were proud of my accomplishments. They reached out because Madison needed something. I see, I said quietly. Thanks for clearing that up. Before they could say anything else, I turned and walked back to the dining room. The tension followed me like a storm cloud. The catered food had been served while we were in the kitchen. Plates of fancy chicken with creamy sauce were in front of every guest. I sat down, my appetite gone, and mindlessly pushed the food around on my plate. The sauce had a strange flavor, almost nutty, but I didn't think much of it at first. I took a few bites, lost in thought, when suddenly my throat started to feel tight. Panic hit me like a wave. I dropped my fork, grabbing at my neck. "Peanuts!" I gasped, my hands shaking as I reached for my purse. I fumbled for my EpiPen, my mind racing. No, this can't be happening. Chaos erupted around me. Chairs scraped against the floor, voices rose in panic, and footsteps rushed toward me. Grandma's voice cut through the noise, steady and urgent. "Someone call 911." Everything became a blur. The walls spun, voices blurred together, and my vision darkened. The last thing I felt was Grandma's hand holding mine, her voice trembling but firm. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Just keep breathing." When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The steady beep of monitors filled the room. My throat was raw, and my body felt heavy, like I'd been hit by a truck. Grandma sat beside me, her face tired but relieved. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, leaning in closer when she saw my eyes open. "We almost lost you, Rebecca." Her words hit me hard. "It was bad?" I croaked. She nodded. "The doctor said it was one of the worst reactions they've ever seen. The EpiPen and the paramedics barely got to you in time." I let that sink in. I could have died, at a family party, after 8 years of avoiding them. My voice was barely a whisper. "The food. They knew." Grandma's expression darkened, but before she could respond, Aunt Marjorie burst into the room, followed closely by her daughter Lori. Lori clutched her phone tightly, her face unusually serious. "Rebecca," Aunt Marjorie said, her voice trembling with anger, "there's something you need to see." Lori stepped forward and held out her phone, her hands shaking. "I was recording the whole party," she said quietly. "I caught something. You need to see it." The video started with the dining room in view. Lori had set up her phone near the dessert table, probably planning to capture more party footage. In the video, I saw myself leave the room with my parents. A few moments later, Madison stood up from her seat, glanced around, and casually walked over to my plate. My heart stopped as I watched her reach into her designer purse and pull out a small jar. She opened it, scooped out a spoonful of something, and stirred it into my food. Then she sat back down, a smug smile on her face. "That's peanut butter," Aunt Marjorie said, her voice hard. "Your sister deliberately put peanut butter in your food." I stared at the screen, unable to look away. Madison's actions were so casual, so deliberate, and that smirk, that tiny, satisfied smirk, made it clear this wasn't a mistake. It was planned. "She knew," Grandma said softly, her voice breaking. "She knew exactly what she was doing." I felt sick. Madison, my own sister, had tried to poison me. She could have killed me. The anger didn't hit right away. At first, it was just shock, disbelief. I couldn't wrap my head around what I'd just seen. My mind kept replaying the video, Madison's smirk, the way she casually stirred the peanut butter into my food like it was nothing. Grandma placed her hand over mine. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. But as the shock wore off, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I'm going to confront them. Against the doctor's advice, I left the hospital that same afternoon. The video Lori had sent me was heavy in my pocket, like it carried the weight of everything I'd been through. When I pulled up to my parents' house, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I wasn't nervous. I was furious. The kind of fury that comes from years of being dismissed, ignored, and made to feel like you don't matter. I slammed the car door shut and marched up to the front door. Inside, they were all sitting in the living room, Mom, Dad, and Madison, acting like nothing had happened, like I hadn't almost died at their dinner table just hours earlier. Madison barely looked up from her phone. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you still be at the hospital, being dramatic?" I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and pressed play. The room went silent. Madison's head shot up as she watched herself on the screen, walking to my plate, stirring peanut butter into my food, and sitting back down with that smug smile. The color drained from her face. Then, unbelievably, she laughed. "Oh, come on," she said with a shrug. "It was just a prank." "A prank?" My voice shook with rage. "I could have died, Madison. Do you understand that?" The doctor said I barely made it. Madison rolled her eyes. "You're always so dramatic." "It was a joke, Rebecca. Lighten up." Mom stood up, crossing her arms. "This is getting ridiculous. Madison was just having a bit of fun. You know how sensitive you are about your allergy." I stared at them, stunned. "You think almost killing me is fun?" Dad's voice turned cold. "Listen carefully, Rebecca. If you even think about taking this to the police, you're no longer our daughter. We'll disinherit you completely." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. These people weren't my family. They never had been. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door. Once I got home, I knew exactly what I had to do. I sat at my computer, uploaded the video to my social media, and wrote a simple caption. "Today I learned what family truly means, and these people are not it. My sister deliberately poisoned me, knowing I have a life-threatening allergy. My parents called it a prank. This is the last time I will ever call them family." The video went viral within hours. At first, it was just a handful of comments from friends and distant relatives, expressing shock, disbelief, and outrage. Then it started to spread. People were tagging others, sharing the post with captions like, "What the actual hell?" and "Family can be worse than strangers." I hadn't expected it to blow up like that, but I wasn't surprised by the reactions. The video spoke for itself. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly reaching out. Aunt Marjorie shared the video with a scathing post of her own. "I've watched this family treat Rebecca like dirt for years. I'm ashamed to be related to them." One by one, people started taking sides. Most were horrified by Madison's actions, but of course my parents and Madison weren't going to take it lying down. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of notifications and one post that made my blood boil. Madison had posted a tearful video of her own. She sat in her room, her face carefully made up to look like she'd been crying. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I just can't believe my own sister would do this to me. She's always been jealous of me, and now she's trying to ruin my life with lies. I'd never hurt her. It was just a misunderstanding." The comments were a mix of support and skepticism. Some people bought into her sob story, but most didn't. One comment stood out. "But what about the video? You literally see her putting peanut butter in the food." Madison's response? "That video was taken out of context. I was just fixing the plate. Rebecca's always had it out for me." I rolled my eyes. Of course. Playing the victim was Madison's signature move. Later that day, a letter was delivered to my apartment from my parents' lawyer. I sat at my kitchen table, ripping it open with shaky hands. It was exactly what I expected. I had been officially disowned. The letter detailed how I had been removed from their will and cut out of any family inheritance. It was cold and businesslike, signed by both my parents. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the paper. It should have hurt. It should have made me feel rejected, devastated. But all I felt was relief. They were finally being honest. I didn't belong to that family, and I never had. Grandma called me that evening, her voice firm. "I've spoken to my lawyer," she said. "I'm cutting them off completely." "What?" "I've already made the arrangements. Everything I have, my house, my savings, everything, is going to you. You've always been more my daughter than Camille's anyway." I didn't know what to say. My chest tightened with emotion. "Grandma, you don't have to do that." "I want to," she interrupted. "They've made their choice, and so have I. Family isn't about blood, it's about love, and you've always been my family." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Thank you." As the days went by, the fallout continued. Madison's video backfired. People weren't buying her crocodile tears, especially after Aunt Marjorie and Lori both posted more context. Lori shared the full video from the party. Every second, including Madison's smug smirk as she stirred the peanut butter into my food. Madison's reputation was in shambles. Her social media accounts went private, but by then, the damage was done. People were tagging her in comments like, "You could have killed your sister. What's wrong with you? This isn't a prank, it's attempted murder. Hope you enjoy the consequences." Meanwhile, my inbox was flooded with messages of support, from friends, co-workers, even strangers. One message stood out. "I know what it's like to have toxic family. You're not alone." But it wasn't over yet. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. It was the police. "Rebecca Dawson?" "Yes?" "We'd like to talk to you about filing a formal complaint against your sister." I blinked in surprise. "I already posted the video." "The video's enough to start an investigation," the officer said. "But if you're willing to file a report, we can take it further." I hesitated for a moment, thinking about the fallout, the backlash, the drama, but then I thought about everything Madison had put me through. It wasn't just the peanut butter incident, it was a lifetime of cruelty, manipulation, and gaslighting. "I'll do it," I said. "Let's file the report." That evening, I sat down with Grandma over tea. "I did it," I told her. "I filed the report." She nodded, a proud smile on her face. "Good. It's about time they faced some real consequences." "Do you think they'll ever change?" I asked quietly. Grandma shook her head. "No. People like that don't change, sweetheart. They just get better at hiding who they are. But you've done the right thing. You've chosen to break the cycle." Her words stayed with me long after she left. For years, I'd felt trapped by my family's toxic dynamics, like I couldn't escape the roles they'd forced me into. But now, I was free. The police report I filed against Madison sent shockwaves through the family. I didn't hear directly from my parents after that. Not that I expected to, but word got back to me through Aunt Marjorie. "They're furious," she said over the phone. "Your mother's been telling everyone you're ruining the family." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she is." "They don't get it," Marjorie continued, her voice growing softer. "But a lot of us do. You're not ruining anything. You're just refusing to stay quiet about what's been done to you." For the first time in years, I felt truly seen. The investigation moved slowly, as these things do. Madison wasn't arrested, but she was officially questioned by the police. That alone was enough to rattle her perfect little world. Her social media presence vanished completely. No more curated selfies or artsy shots of her inspirational life. The only updates I got about her came from Lori. "She's gone into hiding," Lori said during one of our calls. "Nobody wants to be associated with her right now. Her friends all turned on her." I should have felt satisfied, but I didn't. What Madison did was monstrous, but she was a product of the environment she grew up in. My parents created her, molded her into someone who thought she could do no wrong, and now they were reaping what they sowed. Weeks later, I got another letter. This time it wasn't from a lawyer, it was from my parents. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for hours before I finally worked up the courage to open it. I unfolded the letter, and my mother's neat handwriting stared back at me. "Rebecca, we've always tried to do what's best for you and Madison. We're heartbroken that things have come to this point. We never intended for you to feel neglected or unloved. Please consider dropping the charges against your sister. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to have her life ruined over it. Family is supposed to forgive each other. Let's put this behind us and move forward as a family. Love, Mom and Dad." I read it twice, feeling my anger grow with each word. They didn't apologize for what they did. They didn't acknowledge Madison's cruelty. They didn't even express concern for what I went through. All they cared about was Madison's reputation. I crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Later that night, Grandma called. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. "They sent me a letter," I said, my voice tight. Grandma let out a soft sigh. "Did they apologize?" "No, they just want me to drop the charges." I thought as much. Her voice was calm, steady. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You don't owe them anything. Not forgiveness, not understanding." You've given them chance after chance, and they've shown you who they are. Believe them." "I know," I whispered. "I'm just tired." "I know you are," Grandma said softly, "but you've come so far. Don't let them pull you back in." I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The messages of support kept coming, from friends, colleagues, even strangers who'd seen my post. People shared their own stories of toxic families and painful experiences. One message stood out. "Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to have. You have to build your own." That idea stuck with me. For so long, I'd been chasing something I'd never get: approval, love, validation from people who were incapable of giving it. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my own family: Grandma, Aunt Marjorie, Lori, the people who truly cared about me. A few months after everything happened, Grandma invited me over for dinner. "I made your favorite," she said with a warm smile, pulling a pan of lasagna from the oven. And yes, I triple-checked all the ingredients. We sat at the table, laughing and reminiscing. Lori joined us too, snapping photos and making us pose like it was a big event. As we sat there, surrounded by love and laughter, I realized something important. I did have a family, not the one I was born into, but the one I chose. The fallout from the incident faded over time. Madison disappeared from social circles. My parents cut ties with most of the extended family. They were left in the small, isolated world they'd created for themselves. And me? I thrived. Work was going well. I moved into a bigger apartment, decorated it with things that made me happy. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I even started dating. For the first time in years, I felt free. On the anniversary of my promotion, the day everything had started, I posted a follow-up on social media. The post read, "1 year ago, I learned a hard truth. Not everyone who shares your blood is your family. Sometimes, family is the people who show up for you, who love you unconditionally, and who make you feel like you belong. I've learned to let go of toxic ties and embrace the people who truly matter. And for anyone out there dealing with toxic family, you're not alone. You can build your own family. You deserve peace. You deserve love." The comments poured in. This hit hard. "Thank you for sharing your story. I needed this today." "Family isn't always blood. You're so right." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. Grandma called me later that night. "I saw your post," she said. "Beautifully written." "Thanks, Grandma." "I'm proud of you, Rebecca. I always have been." And for once, I fully believed it. Story 2, 32 years old. The bank called me a few months ago regarding an application for a $200,000 loan. The odd thing was that I was unaware of it and had not applied for a loan. I later learned that my sister Melissa's ideal wedding had been funded by a debt my parents had taken out in my name. I was never close to Melissa, who is now 27 years old, and she has always been pampered. Melissa is mature enough to have considered her options, especially during family gatherings, even if my parents bear some of the burden. We don't really talk. Finding out that my parents, with whom I hadn't talked for years, had taken out such a large loan without notifying me, and even made me the co-signer, was what startled me the most. Melissa and her fiancé Kevin got engaged a few months ago, and they had been together for almost a year. I wasn't even invited, but the loan was for their wedding. To be honest, I didn't mind being rejected since I expected it. I didn't believe the wedding was a problem because my parents never brought it up. I quickly contacted my parents after the bank call. I initially believed it may have been an error, but they promptly acknowledged it. They even stood up for Melissa, arguing that it was only fitting that I, as her sister, assist with her wedding, even if it meant taking out a debt in my name. It seems that my parents were unable to refuse Melissa's request for money for the wedding. It's unexpected because Melissa and Kevin both work and ought to be able to pay for their own wedding. They yet said that they were unable to bear the expense themselves. Melissa wanted a lavish wedding according to my parents, which drove up the costs. Even Kevin's parents were solicited for assistance, but they declined and established strict guidelines. Why, therefore, were my parents unable to follow suit? My parents even went so far as to forge my signature, since I wouldn't accept the loan. They didn't even bother to tell me since they believed that requesting my consent would be too much hassle. I couldn't contain my rage when I learned. However, it was too late to reverse the loan approval at that point. I made the decision to sue my parents because I was determined to make things right. "It's only normal for you to assist your sister," my father insisted often. "We are related." He made an effort to blame me by claiming that bringing a lawsuit would only harm the family, making excuses about my sister. It became evident when my father hung up in rage that Melissa's wedding was more important to him than the fact that they had committed fraud. I made up my mind at that point. I was ready to sever my relationship with my parents and told them I was pursuing legal action. I started carefully preparing my legal course of action to limit any needless consequences after calling the bank to get copies of the loan-related paperwork. In order to completely comprehend the situation and make sure I was prepared for what was ahead, I also sought legal advice. I felt overpowered as I read over the loan agreement. The requirement that the money be paid back within 3 years caught my attention, an enormous burden. I never consented to do that. My parents were aware that I would shortly launch my own company. I had been looking for investors and obtaining funds for months, and they knew I was going to leave my work, so I wouldn't have a reliable source of income for some time. In spite of this, they had not expressed any interest in my initiatives. They had forced me into a predicament where I would have to pay back the full $200,000 debt if I missed even one payment. I feel deceived. I made the decision to go farther. I went on Facebook and looked for Kevin, Melissa's fiancé. Something changed inside of me at that very instant. I believed that everyone should be aware of the reality if my family was the cause of my current predicament. I composed a thorough letter outlining how my parents had obtained a loan in my name, falsified my signature, and managed all the documentation without my permission. I suggested that Kevin end the engagement and carefully consider being married into a household that would indulge in such behavior. I continued after that. Melissa's friends, family, and even my parents received the same message. I believed that everyone should be aware of what had transpired. However, I secretly wondered if I had overreached myself. I wanted to know whether my sister was aware of the borrowing. It was difficult to think that they did this without her knowledge, because she was always close to our parents. My parents were upset when I began to ask questions. They kept getting in touch with my sister and pleaded with me to retract what I had said. As it happened, she was unaware of the loan or the fact that I had been added as a co-signer. She was furious that she had been misled and that she would now have to pay for the wedding herself when she learned about it. Our parents infuriated her. My mother got hysterical, as was to be anticipated, accusing me of destroying everything and claiming that I had no right to become involved. I informed Kevin and his family the truth, which infuriated my parents, but I chose to ignore them. In retrospect, I questioned if providing such much assistance for my sister was truly essential. In order to give her the money, my parents had planned to lie to me. After then, I got a call from my sister. "I was unaware of the loan," she said. "However, before alerting Kevin and his family, you ought to have spoken with the family." She said I ruined her love and her wedding. She wasn't totally incorrect. I ought to have first spoken with the family. But was she really ignorant of it? I became uncomfortable. Had I revealed the truth too much? Was it the correct decision for me? It caused a great deal of confusion to drag Kevin's family into this. I remained steadfast in my resolve to file a lawsuit nevertheless. In response, the bank stated that since the transaction was not yet executed, they will look into the bogus loan application. Any payments would not be my responsibility. I felt relieved. I was able to locate Kevin and his family's contact details a few days later. My phone kept ringing in the interim. My parents, family, and friends began calling and leaving messages. Additionally, I received an angry message from my sister saying, "You've made a private family matter public. You overreached yourselves." Later, she contacted and stated that after hearing what I had to say, Kevin and his family were rethinking the wedding. I was very perplexed. She said that I had ruined her future, and ruined her life. She maintained that my parents had made me the co-signer and that she had no knowledge of the loan. I was shocked when I heard my sister accuse me. She advised me to talk to our parents directly, rather than severing relationships if I had an issue. I must admit that I was furious when I emailed Kevin and his family. However, I didn't believe I was mistaken at the moment. "You knew about all this, didn't you?" I questioned my sister. "It's none of my concern," she insisted. I told her that her parents had always put her before me, had always said yes to her, and now they had cheated on me in order to grant her wants. She didn't take this well, and because she didn't appear to be lying, I began to question whether I had been mistaken to believe she was involved. Even though I wasn't sure if I could trust her, I wasn't prepared to let it end so soon. My mother contacted me the next morning. She was sobbing and pleading with me to change my mind. She informed me that Kevin and my sister had called it quits on their engagement. I was surprised. When I talked to my sister the previous evening, she had not brought it up. All she said was that it was difficult. I was stunned to hear this without mentioning that the engagement was over. My sister was heartbroken, and my mother told me that she blamed me a lot. It seems that Kevin realized how serious the matter was when someone suggested that he reconsider the engagement. My mom continued to accuse me of destroying my sister's life, destroying our family and bringing a great deal of suffering for everyone. Silently, I listened. I felt strangely sure that I had done the right thing, but I also felt guilty. I couldn't help but feel a tiny feeling of accomplishment when I watched my parents suffer the repercussions of their behavior. However, I was also sorry to hear that my sister's wedding arrangements had failed. When my mom had finished speaking, I informed her quite forcefully that I would not apologize for being honest. "Remember, you were a fraudster. Here, I'm not the bad guy. My parents signed those contracts without my permission, and I chastised them for it." My mother, however, still didn't seem to see how terrible what they had done was. I felt exhausted for the remainder of the week. However, my mother insisted that I should have disregarded everything in order to preserve harmony and the family's unity. I was able to stay away from my relatives. However, rumors rapidly began to circulate. Family members started to express their thoughts on what had transpired. While some agreed with me that you had every right to be furious, others argued that you shouldn't have made this a family matter that was public knowledge. My sister began posting often on social media around this period, expressing her emotions without specifically naming anyone, whether it was about her friends, myself, or someone else. She was obviously disturbed. Seeing folks who didn't completely comprehend the issue made me uncomfortable, expressing support and sorrow for her. Things like, "Some people just want to see others suffer," were written, or "Your own relatives may betray you in the worst way." I said nothing since I didn't want to start a social media dispute with my sister. My sister got in touch with me once again a few days later. This time she was quieter, but still agitated. "The engagement is officially off," she informed me. "Kevin's family has severed all links with me, and I'm ending our relationship." She said that she was leaving their shared house and spending some time with a friend. Then she said something that really caught me off guard. After repeatedly asserting that she was unaware of the loan and uninvolved, she finally acknowledged that she had known about it all along. At last, she admitted that she had known from the start. "I believed that after the wedding, everything would be fine," she stated. "I had no idea it would become such a significant issue." She went on to say that when I requested, she hadn't anticipated the bank getting in touch with me personally. "How come you didn't inform me earlier?" She answered, "I was too afraid." She acknowledged that they had intended to hide everything from me out of concern that I would spoil the wedding if I did. She no longer felt the need to conceal it, though, when Kevin called off the engagement. What I had been hearing for the last week was unbelievable. I had been feeling terrible for her and overcome with remorse. I now see, however, that she had been a part of the plot from the beginning. She appeared distraught because her plan to utilize the debt had failed, not because her relationship had ended. She referred to me as immature and a horrible person. "I don't know anything about you, and I don't need to return any favors," I said coolly. I knew then that I could stop her from making excuses. Our family ties had deteriorated to the point that I knew there was no way to mend them. I got a weird feeling of comfort after speaking with my sister, as if a burden had been removed. I no longer felt the need to worry about individuals who didn't care about me, and my family had never really cared about me. However, the mess left behind was unaffected by that discourse. My parents continued to try to get in touch with me over the following several weeks, despite the fact that I hadn't spoken to them in a long time. Our connection only deteriorated. I kept getting calls from relatives urging me to withdraw the lawsuit. "Aren't they your parents?" they would ask. "Is there not any method to deal with this?" They appeared to be unaware of my parents' deception and thought that going to court would be too severe. I disregarded their entreaties and remained committed to working with my attorney to collect proof. My anger increased as I learned more about my parents' wrongdoing. They had lied about their salary and faked financial paperwork in order to obtain the loan, in addition to forging my signature. Thankfully, the bank agreed with me and determined that I was liable for the loan. Nevertheless, the family dispute worsened while my parents were in major legal issues. In the meantime, my sister left her apartment to start afresh and moved in with friends. She was upset with our parents for placing her in this predicament and blamed me for ending her relationship with Kevin. My Aunt Anna sent me an email one day. She had avoided being embroiled in the drama and had maintained her objectivity throughout. Since Anna wasn't the kind to start arguments, I accepted her invitation to coffee. She inquired about my conversation with someone who wasn't attempting to control me when we first met. It was reassuring, and I valued her sincere care. She brought up my parents after we had discussed the previous happenings. She stirred her coffee and remarked, "Your parents seem very shaken right now. They are concerned about the potential outcomes of a court case. To be honest, though, they ought to have considered it before committing fraud. I guess they didn't think you would go this far." With a knowing nod, she said. Her remarks strengthened my resolve to avoid being trampled underfoot by my parents ever again. Then she inquired, "I know how you feel, but what are your true desires? Do you want her parents to take responsibility for their actions, or do you want a heartfelt apology?" She asked a question that surprised me. She responded politely, "I just wanted to understand your ultimate goal." I became aware that I had never considered things from that perspective previously. While a part of me believed my parents should be held accountable for their acts, another part of me just wanted to get out of this disaster. Perhaps all I want is for them to realize that they can no longer treat me in this manner. "Slowly," I said, "I want this to end." However, I had no idea how to get there. No matter what, my parents had always given preference to my sister, and they had overreached themselves this time. I was unable to ignore it. Anna gave a little nod. "I know exactly how you're feeling." "I said," she said, "however, your parents do not view it that way. They believe that you are the source of every issue." Although her remarks hurt, I valued her candor. I already knew in my heart that this was my parents' opinion. They would never own up to their faults, as Anna stated. She gave me a hug and gave me encouragement. "Remain strong," she advised. "You're not incorrect in your feelings. Your actions demonstrate greater integrity than whatever your parents have done to you, even if they are unable to acknowledge their own shortcomings." I gave my true desires a lot of thought after our conversation. Even yet, I was aware that my choice may cause the family further stress. I began to question if going to court was the best course of action, or whether there may be an other way to settle this. My lawyer contacted a few days later to inform me that my parents' counsel had suggested an out-of-court settlement. I felt uneasy when I heard this. In exchange for me dropping the case, my parents were prepared to pay a large sum of money. I wasn't sure if I should forgive them so readily, but I wanted to go on. In addition to making them financially responsible, the settlement offer was more than sufficient to prevent a drawn-out court struggle. I went over the specifics with my lawyer. The funds would allow me to concentrate on my business and alleviate my financial concerns, releasing me from the tension that had been a burden on me for a long time. A part of me, however, was concerned that accepting the offer might convey the impression that I had forgiven my parents. This settlement, however, seemed like a minor win. Ultimately, it provided me with an opportunity to move on and concentrate on my future. In exchange for my parents paying the compensation, I agreed to dismiss the case, so I accepted the offer. Even though this took care of my immediate problems, the bank nevertheless accused my parents of fraud. Even though it wasn't the ideal result, I was relieved when the paperwork was finished and everything was set in stone. I'm over the litigation. The clutter was no longer a concern for me, but this choice permanently altered my connection with my family. The custom of celebrating holidays together has vanished, and there would be no more family get-togethers after this. Instead of feeling at ease, I felt as though we had become strangers, connected only by blood and a common history. The settlement was a step in the right direction, since it allowed me to concentrate on launching my new company. But it was difficult to let go completely. The incidents kept coming back to me, even weeks later, and I had to come to terms with the fact that I would never have the same connection with my family. It seemed as though I had lost them forever, even though they were still living. I knew they wouldn't reach out, and I didn't want to. I was working late one evening at my new office. My Aunt Anna sent me an email. "Just how have you been?" she said. We hadn't communicated since our previous encounter a few weeks prior, so I was taken aback. "I know this has been hard, but don't carry it all on your own," she added in her email. I was more moved by her remarks than I had anticipated. She seemed to realize that I was having trouble somehow. I became aware of how alone I had grown, losing friends and separating from my family. I couldn't adequately describe the significance of her message to me. I made the decision that I didn't have to bear the load alone, even though I had no idea how to mend my connection with my family. We reconnected at the same cafe a few days later. "Family isn't always about genetic links," I remarked as I relaxed and gave myself a nice glance. As I considered the settlement, her words lingered in my mind. I was torn about taking the money, even if it gave me the freedom to go on. I still harbored resentment toward my parents. "You choose your family," she went on. "Finding people who will stand by you is acceptable. Even if your parents or sister are no longer in your life, you don't need to cling to the past." Her remark struck a deep chord. Even after all the pain, letting go of family felt like wiping out years of attempting to win their acceptance, something that had greatly influenced my identity. That day, I came to the realization that I could start a new kind of family for myself, and that it was acceptable to move on without clinging to the past. I believed it was impossible to move on, but as Anna pointed out, I didn't have to remain mired in the past. I was able to begin a new life, free from the people who had harmed me, thanks to her support. It wasn't simple, but it wasn't insurmountable. After a few weeks, I started my own business using the settlement funds. I started taking on meaningful and doable challenges after hiring staff. My days gradually became more satisfying. My new passion was work, and I felt optimistic about the future for the first time in a long time. I received a call from an unidentified number one evening as I was leaving work for home. I felt uneasy about it, as if the past wasn't quite ready to let go of me. When I picked up the phone, it was my sister. "I would like to speak with you again," she said. I was surprised by how calm her voice was. Hearing from her again made me uneasy because I hadn't spoken to her since her engagement was called off. "I recently learned that our parents are selling the house," she added. "I believed you ought to be aware." She spoke in a heavy voice. "Our parents are in debt, and I know you don't want to hear this. Their funds are depleted." Her remarks left me unable to speak. I was unsure of how to react. "Due to what transpired with you, they lost everything. But I've realized this is the result of their own actions," she said, adding softly. "I feel a little guilty, but our parents brought this on themselves with their fraud." She paused before saying, "I don't feel responsible for their financial mess, but I don't know what to do either. I couldn't figure out what my sister wanted from me. She had been staying with a friend, but it seemed that situation had gone sour too. Was she looking for sympathy, or was she asking for help?" "Finally," I replied, keeping my tone calm. "I know this is a tough situation. I don't think there's much I can do though. Our parents made their choices, and those choices led to this." "What did our parents want?" she asked immediately. I wasn't trying to start an argument, but her question caught me off guard. For the first time, I noticed a sensitivity in her voice, a sign she was trying to understand the consequences of their actions. I still wasn't sure what she expected, but I knew where I stood and where I needed to go from here. I had rarely seen my sister so unsettled. The sister, who had always been spoiled and raised to feel entitled now, sounded anxious and unsure. "You need to figure this out for yourself," I said gently. "Try to handle it with as much kindness as you can." For years I tried to talk with our parents, but I eventually realized I had to follow my own path. "Maybe it's time for you to find your own path too." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she finally replied, "Yes, maybe it is." After that, we said little else and ended the call. I wasn't entirely sure how I felt in that moment. A few weeks later, I heard that our parents had sold the house and were planning to move into a smaller one. Even then, I knew I couldn't fix their financial problems or solve my sister's struggles. I didn't reach out to my parents for so long. I had craved their approval, but I realized it was time to let that desire go. For the first time, I was building something entirely for myself, with the settlement money. I had established my own company and started a new chapter. It hadn't been an easy journey, but I finally felt free from my parents' expectations and control. I was no longer someone overlooked. I was someone who mattered, someone who could shape their own future. And now, I was ready to walk forward and live my life to the fullest. Story 3. Hello, my name is Michael Foster, and here is the tale of how I discovered that the greatest triumphs may occasionally result from the most heinous betrayals. In business, you see, the person you trust the most may be the one planning your demise, just as in family. However, before pushing you down the edge, they frequently neglect to look underneath. Allow me to take you back to the beginning. The $100 million business that is Foster Technologies was not always that way. My father started it from scratch as a failing consultancy business 15 years ago. Dad was awful at business, but he was great at technology. By 2010, my father's health was deteriorating due to the stress, and we were 3 months away from filing for bankruptcy. My elder brother James was 30 and already well known in the local nightlife scene, whereas I was 25 and just out of business school. James, the affable firstborn who could talk his way out of anything, had always been Dad's favorite. However, charm doesn't cover expenses, and the firm had already lost a number of important clients as a result of James's party lifestyle. I can still clearly recall that soggy Tuesday when I discovered my father hunched over his desk, examining our most recent financial papers with tears in his eyes. "It's over, Michael," he said in a hoarse whisper. "Everything I constructed. I will lose everything." That day, something inside of me broke. Even though my father will always consider me second best, I couldn't see his dream end. I began working 18-hour days while James was out at upscale clubs using corporate funds. I met with every client, studied every contract, and gained knowledge of every facet of the company. Mom was concerned about me. She would bring meals to my workplace at midnight and tell Michael that he needed to relax. "The firm cannot be saved by you alone." But I actually did just that. It was a terrible first year. I personally visited all of our important clients, reorganized our debt, and eliminated wasteful spending, including James's entertainment budget. I continued returning even though we lost a lot of doors that were slandered in my face. It pays to persevere. We were breaking even at the end of the year. James thought it was amusing. When Mikey bothered to come to work, he would make fun of the business people he was portraying. I will still be in control of it. I am, the oldest. I put my job first and ignored him. I turned Foster Technologies from a basic 8 consulting business into a full-service digital transfer machine corporation over the course of the following 5 years. We created in-house software solutions, ventured into cloud services, and established a stellar industry reputation. The business's sales climbed rapidly from $2 million. Our personnel increased from 20 to over 500 last year, and we reached $10 million, $50 million, and eventually $100 million. We set up offices in 3 different nations. As the business prospered, Dad's health improved, but his partiality remained unchanged. Even though James spent much of his time organizing his next trip over family dinners, his leadership was nevertheless credited with every achievement. James's financial ability was praised by his father. As I sat calmly, I browsed through my phone's quarterly reports. Credit didn't matter to me. I was invested in the business, our staff, and the legacy we were creating. In addition, I had other intentions. What? Not even my father was present, so no one knew. Over the years, I've been meticulously recording everything. James squandered every dime, every customer, and every choice. More significantly, I've been subtly establishing connections with our most essential clients, becoming an invaluable part of their operations. During the company's worst days, when we were on the verge of going bankrupt, I used my personal money and took out personal loans to keep us afloat. This was just one of my many secrets, and it would prove to be important. The paperwork was hidden in reams of corporate paperwork, but I legally owned 40% of Foster Technologies in return for shares, lots of shares. Or at least that's what I believed would keep me safe. I was completely mistaken. Everything changed last month. Everyone anticipated that when Dad announced his retirement, he would select me as his successor. I have, after all, been successfully managing the business for many years. James had also begun attending work more frequently, presumably anticipating the shift. On Friday afternoon, the shareholders' meeting was scheduled. Our board members and important investors were among the important stakeholders in attendance. In order to make his announcement, I prepared a thorough presentation outlining our growth strategy for the next 5 years. James was grinning in his chair, but I didn't give it any attention at the time. Dad started, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm leaving my position as CEO of Foster Technologies, as you are aware. It was difficult to choose my successor because this firm has been my life's work." He stopped and surveyed the space. "However, there is only one individual who genuinely possesses the leadership abilities required to advance Foster Technologies, someone who is aware of our family's beliefs and has the foresight to guide us into the future." I straightened up in my chair, prepared to take on the duty for which I had spent so many years preparing. "James Foster, my son, will assume the role of CEO with immediate effect." There was silence in the room. Dad wasn't done, but I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. "James has also alerted me to certain troubling anomalies in our most recent activities. It appears that certain people have been acting without authorization and may have jeopardized the integrity of our business." James got up with a folder in his hand. "Regretfully, my brother Michael has been acting above his power, maybe engaging in unethical behavior and making unfulfillable promises to clients." What I was hearing was unbelievable. Each charge was a perverted representation of reality. They were portraying the precise choices that had preserved and expanded the business as careless and unapproved. "As a result," Dad continued, "I'm firing Michael from Foster Technologies with immediate effect as my last act as CEO." The security officers had already moved toward my seat. Fake pity was evident in James's voice. "Little brother, I'm sorry it had to end this way, but perhaps you can now live a life away from the office." Whispers filled the room as I was led out, my access denied, my keycard disabled. I saw the sympathy. They had no clue what was about to happen since James had missed 3 important things when he was planning my demise. In some cases, the fruit was strewn in others. First, all of the unapproved judgments were duly recorded and authorized. Second, they were mistaken about how buried my 40% ownership share was. Third, well, let's just say that you find out where everyone is buried after 10 years of developing a company's technical infrastructure. Literally, at times. That night, while I was making my way to my car, I opened my phone and texted an old acquaintance at the SEC just once. I went home and waited after that. It was going to be a very intriguing Monday morning. The rainstorm that greeted Monday morning seemed appropriate for the events that were about to take place. As the clock approached 9 in the morning, when James will be making his debut as CEO, I sat in my home office and watched. It had been an eventful weekend. Mom hadn't phoned at all, but she had left heartfelt voicemails about family togetherness on 17 separate occasions. James had been too preoccupied with his beloved club's celebrations. The business credit card was prominently displayed on the table in the pictures, which were widely shared on social media, including some dubious ones. I grinned as I recalled James's constant belief that technology was beneath him. It's geeky stuff. Refusing to learn even basic cybersecurity protocols, he would remark. He was going to pay a heavy price for his conceit. I heard my phone vibrate at precisely 9:15 a.m. James's faithful executive assistant, Sarah, texted me. But he hadn't bothered to terminate her, likely because he assumed she had merely delivered coffee. "It's just getting started," she wrote. I turned on my laptop and logged into the internal security stream of Foster Technology. I still have access, yes. You always leave a back door open when you build his system from the ground up. James was seen on camera entering the CEO's office with coffee in hand, prepared to take over. He sat in my chair, a leather one, and pressed his computer's power button. The show started at that point. A movie began to play in place of the Windows login screen. 3 years ago, surveillance footage captured James in his own office, negotiating the sale of our client data to our largest rival. The sound was really clear. I can provide you their details, of course. The voice of James echoed. "In any case, my foolish brother does all the labor. Please ensure that my Cayman account receives the money." James made a desperate attempt to switch off the monitor, but it was unsuccessful. All the screens in his workplace continued to broadcast the footage, but that was only the start. His cell rang. Along with supporting documentation of James's unlawful actions throughout the previous 10 years, the SEC had received an anonymous tip on insider trading. Notifications began to ping his private email. Federal agents were entering via the front entrance when all of his private correspondence was somehow leaked to the board members in the lobby. James's countenance changed from bewilderment to terror as I watched the security footage. When he attempted to call his father, his phone was busy. Most likely as a result of his own revelations on the actions of his cherished firstborn. Sarah entered James's office at 9:30 in the morning. Calmly, she said, "Mr. Foster, an urgent meeting is being requested by the board members. Additionally, federal agents have come to visit you." James began to perspire. "Get it up here to fix these fucking machines, tell them I'm busy, and cancel everything." Sarah gave a courteous grin. "That won't be feasible, I'm afraid." "Oh," he said. "The department as a whole simply quit. They issued an email to the entire firm outlining their reasons for being loyal to the individual who founded the business." "What?" "That is not possible for them. We have agreements, in fact." On his desk, Sarah put a folder. The contracts were with a subsidiary that is no longer associated with Foster Technologies as of this morning, and that owns all the intellectual property rights. James opened the packet with trembling hands. It included a straightforward document that revealed the ownership structure of Foster Innovation Labs, the subsidiary that I had secretly established years prior, the business that truly had all of our software, patents, and customer agreements. And I'm the sole owner. However, the clients have already been notified of the management change. James stumbled. The majority have already entered into new agreements with Foster Innovation Labs directly. It appears that they would rather deal with the individual who has been managing their accounts for so long. When James finally realized that every piece of technology that made Foster Technologies significant, every client connection that kept it lucrative, and every important employee who kept it running were all devoted to me, the color left his face. He had taken a shell that was empty. The door to the office opened once more. Our principal legal counsel, Mr. Patterson, entered after 2 FBI agents, James Foster. "We need to ask you certain questions regarding specific financial activities," one agent stated. James looked around the room frantically and said, "You can't do this. I am in control here as the CEO." Mr. Patterson's throat was cleaned. He really took out another document on it. A board emergency meeting just ended. In light of the situation, they decided to fire you as CEO with immediate effect. That is not possible for them. I am the owner of your Foster Technologies shares. Mr. Patterson fixed a business that, as of this morning at 9, had no core development staff, no significant clients, and no intellectual property. I think that reality is reflected in the stock price. James Lunch, most likely to check the stock ticker on his computer. As federal officers dragged James out of the building, his face pale and his fancy suit crumpled, his screen, of course, was still broadcasting recordings of his numerous unlawful deeds over the years. I used my remote access to send one last email to every employee at Foster Technologies. You may choose. Join us. or stay on a sinking ship. Foster Creativity Labs are places where honesty and creativity are truly valued. You will have greater benefits, your jobs are safe, and most importantly, your efforts will be valued. 90% of the employees accepted the offer within an hour, but my retaliation wasn't finished yet. The issue of dear old Dad's retirement fund remained. The aftermath was stunning. The shares of Foster Technologies fell 70% in a day. James's arrest generated headlines in all of the big business magazines. Aita CEO was detained on many fraud-related allegations. As a scandal breaks out, Foster Technologies are in freefall. I wasn't finished yet, though. I sat in my new office at Foster Innovation Labs headquarters, a state-of-the-art structure I had surreptitiously acquired 6 months prior, 3 days after James's incarceration. Sarah entered with a well-known face, Mr. Goldman, Dad's financial advisor. Mr. Goldman added, appearing uneasy. He's been calling nonstop ever since he realized that his retirement fund is worthless. I completed for him since he kept all of his retirement funds in business shares and put all of his money into Foster Technology stock, which had always boasted of having a stake in the outcome. He had never paid attention to diversification recommendations, yet it was bad financial planning. At this point, those shares were worth very little. Mr. Goldman went on, "Your father is desperate. Your mother, Mrs. Foster, is concerned that they may lose their home." As I reclined in my chair, I reflected on all the occasions when my father had disregarded my cautions over James's conduct and credited my accomplishments to chance rather than diligence. "Call a meeting." At last, I said, "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. in this place." My folks showed up to Foster Innovation Labs the next morning. Mom seems to have been weeping. In only 1 week, Dad appeared to have aged 10 years. They were seated opposite me in the guest seats, which were identical to the ones my father had made me sit in when he gave me a lesson on true leadership. Son Dad's voice started to tremble. "I know I made mistakes," I said gently, interrupting. "Ella James obliterates proof of his transgressions. He embezzled business monies with your aid. You participated in fraud. Our stockholders, clients, and workers were all harmed by that." I was unaware that he attempted to object. I interrupted him. "As you knew. You simply didn't give a damn. Because I was only your fallback option and James was your golden boy." Mom began to sob quietly. I gave her a piece of Kleenex. "But you're not here for that," I said. "You're broke, which is why you're here, because we are meant to pay for your retirement with corporate shares that are worthless." Dad sagged down on his seat. "Please, Michael, we are related. Family." I grinned without a sense of humor. "Did you allow James to claim credit for my efforts because I was family?" I took out a folder. "Was I family when you dismissed me in front of the whole company? I discovered that well-documented dramatic disclosures had more impact. This is what will take place. Your Foster Technologies shares will be repurchased by Foster Innovation Labs at the original purchase price." Their eyes became wide with optimism, but I went on to say that there are restrictions. You both first sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding James's actions. Second, you retreat to their Florida home in peace. You talked about it all the time. Third, you don't even bother to inquire about my affairs. Mom murmured. "You do it for us." I made the correction for the frightened 12-year-old child who once thought his father hung the moon, not for you. You offered him less than what he deserved. Dad opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand. "Another stuff. A trustee is included with the funds. Someone who protects you from losing all of your money on one of James's scams. The whole package, including the monthly stipend and investment limits." Dad remarked pitifully. "You don't trust us. You did a great job teaching me the lesson." As security led them out, I signed the documents. That was a final setback. "Son, I was mistaken about you. I've never been a better businessman than you." "I'm Dad," I answered. Simply said, "I'm more adept at identifying my true adversaries. It has been 5 years since then." The $1 billion corporation Foster Innovation Labs is renowned for its innovative technologies and moral corporate conduct. James is currently employed as a bartender in Vegas after serving 2 years in jail. I never respond to the postcards my parents occasionally send me from their tranquil Florida home. I was invited to give a speech at my former business school last week. The subject, The value of honesty in family businesses. I smiled and said yes. I have a good story to tell, after all. Destroying your adversaries isn't always the greatest form of retaliation. They have to live with the fact that they made a mistake in their wager, since they are creating something so successful. Have a quiet one. The cautious one. For those who are unsure, the contingency strategy achieved such a comprehensive triumph. Let's just say that the eagles are observing, waiting, and strategizing their next move, while the peacocks are busy flaunting their plumes. Because it's not about who starts at the top in business, as it is in life. When all is said and done, the question is, who will still be standing?